Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Shaquana Baba. I will be your moderator for your first Ag-Academy session today. Dr. Fletcher, would you want to start at 6:05 or we should start promptly at 6?
6:05 works for me. Hi, everyone.
Okay, so we will pause and wait for everyone at 6:05, then I'll give my introduction and few housekeeping, and then I'll pass it over to you, Dr. Fletcher. Okay, it is officially 6:05. Good evening, everyone, once again. My name is Shaquana Baba. I am your moderator for your first Ag-Cademy session. So I would like to tell you guys welcome. Tonight, we'll be specifically looking at the topic impact of climate change on agriculture with our presenter this afternoon, no other than Dr. James Fletcher. So before we start, we'll just want to just get started on a little bit of housekeeping. So first, you have the chance to utilize your chat box, which is located below. And you are also entitled to use your Q&A box that majority of you has been utilizing throughout the time. When there is a question and answer segment, if you don't feel like to type, just please raise your hand. And once permission is given, you will go ahead and ask your question. So it's my pleasure to welcome you again, Dr. Fletcher. Dr. James Fletcher is an international recognized leader in sustainable development, climate policy, and agriculture. He served as St. Lucia Minister of Public Speaking, Sustainable Development, Energy, Science, and Technology, Information and Broadcasting from 2011 to 2016. During his tenure, he spearheaded reforms in renewable energy, ICT modernization, and public sector transformation. Dr. Fletcher played a leading role in the Caribbean 1.5 to Stay Alive campaign and was a member of the ministerial team that helped secure the landmark Paris Agreement at COP21. He also served as the permanent secretary in both the Ministry of Agriculture and the Office of the Prime Minister of St. Lucia. As an accomplished author, an advocate for climate justice, Dr. Fletcher founded the Caribbean Climate Justice Project in 2020 to advance climate action for vulnerable communities. He holds a PhD in crop psychology, sociology, physiosociology from the University of Cambridge and a BSc in biochemistry from the University of Ottawa. He is currently managing the director of Solar Icon, a consultancy specialized in sustainable development, climate resilience, and governance. Without further ado, I have the pleasure in welcoming you, the presenter for this afternoon. Take it over with Dr. Fletcher.
Thank you very much, and good evening, everyone. And it is my pleasure once again to be at another Helen's Daughters Academy. Can't remember how many times I've done it before, but every time I'm invited, it's the one thing that I willingly agree to do, despite whatever my schedule may be, because of the importance and also because of the great work that Helen's Daughters is doing. So let me go straight into my presentation. Moderator, can you confirm that you are seeing the presentation in
Yes,
full view?
please.
You are? Okay,
Thank
great.
you.
All right, excellent. So, good evening again, everyone. It is a pleasure to join you for this session on the impact of climate change on agriculture. I want to begin by applauding Helen's Daughters for this wonderful initiative. The Academy plays a very important role in educating and empowering the members of Helen's Daughters. And as I said, it's why, regardless of what my schedule looks like, I always accept the invitation to present at this activity. I also want to recognize the important role that each of you plays. As women farmers, you're not only producing food, you're supporting families, you're supplying markets, you're creating employment, and you're strengthening your communities. Tonight, we will talk about climate change and how climate change is affecting agriculture across the Caribbean. More importantly, we will discuss what you can do to protect your farms, improve your resilience, and take advantage of new opportunities. This will not be a technical presentation. The intention is that we have a very practical conversation that is grounded in what you are already experiencing on your farms. So let's start by asking a simple question. Why are we here? Well, we're here because farming is changing. Many farmers are finding, and I'm sure you are, almost every single one of you who is engaged in farming, you're finding that seasons are less predictable. The rains may come too early, too late, or all at once. Dry periods may last longer, as we are currently seeing in St. Lucia and many of the other islands in the Eastern Caribbean. Temperatures are getting hotter, and pests and diseases are sometimes becoming more difficult to control. At the same time, the cost of farming is increasing. Fertilizer, animal feed, fuel, equipment, seeds, and other supplies are becoming more expensive. Climate change is therefore affecting both the way we farm and the cost of farming. So the purpose of this session this evening is to help us better understand these changes and identify practical ways in which we can respond. Now, before we proceed, I want to make this a little bit of an interactive session, just this part. I want to encourage you to, I want to get back from you in whatever way we can, given the limitations of this forum, how some of these impacts, how you're already feeling some of these impacts. So as I mentioned each impact, I would like you to put a thumbs up. You have a reaction that you can put, I think, at the bottom of your screen. So just drop a thumbs up if you have already started to experience this on your farm over the last 5 years. Have you noticed longer dry periods? All those who've noticed longer dry periods? Okay, great. Many, many thumbs up there. Heavier rainfall? Okay. Well, this one I know is a no-brainer. Hotter days? Yeah, these days are extremely, extremely hot, and I'll speak about that in a while, how that's impacting and will impact you even more. More pests and diseases? Lower yields? Shifting planting seasons? This one is really impacting the farmers well, across St. Lucia, but particularly in an area in a community called Babonneau, who really have had a hard time getting water, difficulty finding water. We are supposed to be in the middle of the rainy season in St. Lucia. Our hurricane season has started, and there are communities in this country that have not had potable water in their taps for 3-4 weeks, and it's even worse for farmers who are depending on rainfall to irrigate their farms. And of course, higher production costs. Well, the sad reality is farmers are often among the first people to recognize changes in the environment because you work so closely with the soil, with the weather, with plants and animals every single day. So let's talk about climate change. Let's have a discussion about what really is climate change. Well, climate change refers to the long-term changes in temperature, in rainfall, in wind, in extreme weather events like hurricanes, and all other weather conditions. This is what differentiates it from weather, which is what you are seeing and experiencing at any particular point in time. So right now, if you were to be asked what's the weather like, you say it's hot, it's dry, it's sunny, or it might be raining where you are, or it might be humid. That is weather. Weather is what you are experiencing at a particular point in time. Climate change, however, is how those weather patterns change or have changed or are changing, and how you've noticed that over the last at least 30 years. What we're seeing is that our planet is becoming warmer, mainly because human activities are releasing large amounts of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. And when you talk about greenhouse gases, we basically are talking about carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide, and methane that you get from different sources. Carbon dioxide, we know you get that from burning fossil fuels to produce electricity. You get methane gas from the decomposition of decaying material, and you get nitrous oxide also from burning fossil fuels, but also from things like manufacturing fertilizers and other products that require the use of nitrogen compounds. These gases, as I said, come from activities such as burning oil and gas, cutting down forests, transportation. The more cars you have on the road, the more ships you have on the ocean, the more planes you have flying, the more carbon dioxide you have that's being released. Industry, the more manufacturing that is taking place, the more products that are being developed, the products that you and I cannot do without, like our Samsung and iPhone phones and all of the other appliances in our homes. Every time one of these is produced, carbon dioxide is generated. And some forms of agriculture. And what is happening is that as the planet warms, our weather patterns change. And the planet is warming because we are creating these three gases that I spoke about, carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide. They are referred to as greenhouse gases because, and this is something that as farmers you would understand, If you stand in a greenhouse in the middle of the day, that greenhouse is significantly warmer than it is outside of the greenhouse. Why? Because the covering over your greenhouse, if it's plastic, if it's glass, whatever it is trapping the heat inside the greenhouse. It's not allowing that heat to escape out into the atmosphere. Greenhouse gases do the same thing. They form this film around our planet. And the thicker the film, which you get from more and more greenhouse gases, more and more carbon dioxide and methane in particular being released, the thicker that film, the warmer the planet. The thicker you make that covering of your greenhouse, the warmer your greenhouse will be. If you're sleeping on a bed and it's a little bit cold at night and you cover yourself with a bed sheet, it'll be a lot cooler than if you cover yourself with a comforter or something that is woolly, something that is thicker. Well, that's the same way greenhouse gases are operating. So as our planet warms, our weather patterns change. And for farmers like yourself, climate change may mean hotter temperatures. It may mean less predictable rainfall. And many of you, in the emojis that you dropped, I could see that you've already experienced those. It may mean longer droughts. It may mean heavier downpours. It can mean stronger storms and hurricanes. It can mean rising sea levels because as the temperatures get warmer, and what we're seeing is that the planet is not warming at the same rate. So the amount of warming at the North Pole and at the South Pole is actually more than we're getting for the rest of the planet. So where we have the greatest concentrations of ice and glaciers and icebergs, we're seeing those areas are warming faster. And as that ice melts, it is causing sea levels to rise. I just read a report actually, I think it was yesterday, of a family from one of the islands in the Pacific, Tuvalu, that has already decided to migrate to Australia. And more you're seeing people who live in many of these Pacific islands migrating out of them because in some cases, countries like Palau, countries like Kiribati, Marshall Islands, these islands are only like the highest point on that island, on those islands might be like 6 feet or 10 feet above sea level. So you can understand as those sea levels rise, many areas in those countries are starting to disappear. We're seeing it in some of our islands already. We're seeing that sea levels are encroaching into areas where before we had sand or maybe even before where we had road. We're actually seeing that. But fortunately, because many of the islands in the Caribbean are mountainous, there is some level of retreat. There is somewhere we can move in inland. If you're living on an island in the Pacific where it's totally flat, there is no way, no place, nowhere for you to go to. And that is one of the things that rising sea levels is causing. Changing pest and disease patterns. As it gets warmer, you find that pests and diseases are moving into areas where they were not prevalent before. Climate change does not mean that every day will be hotter or that every year will be drier. What it means is that the overall climate is changing and our day-to-day weather is becoming more difficult to predict. Now, the Caribbean is on the front line of this battle against climate change. In fact, I've stopped referring to it as climate change, and I refer to it now as the climate crisis. That is how serious it is. Caribbean countries contribute only a very small share of global greenhouse gas emissions, yet our region is among the most vulnerable to the effects of climate change. So even where we have countries among us, countries like Trinidad and Tobago, now Guyana, and also Suriname, that are oil and gas producers, what they produce, the amount of greenhouse gases they produce is insignificant compared to the global total of greenhouse gases. In fact, the Caribbean as a whole contributes less than 0.2% of the total greenhouse gases that we see in the world. So less than 1%, 1/5 of 1% is what we produce in the Caribbean. Our countries are small. Many of our communities, our farms, our roads, our hotels, and our businesses are close to the coast. Remember, we are coastal people. Before there were planes, we used boats to move around. So it made sense to locate our communities near the coast because that's how we were able to get produce around. That's how we moved around. So the closer we were to the water, the better it was for us. And also many of us were fishing communities. So it made sense to locate closer to the coast. Plus, there is the fact that in most of our countries, if not all, the coastal areas are flatter than the interior. So it made it much easier to build and settle along the coast than it did in the interior, which was much more mountainous. Most of our economic and social infrastructure is located within close proximity to the coast. Our main roads, our churches, our schools, our airports, our hospitals, our government buildings, our private sector buildings, our hotels, these are all located within very close proximity to the water. So this significantly increases our vulnerability when you start talking about things like sea level rise, when you talk about storm surge that you get from stronger hurricanes. It means that a very big part of our island, of our country, is in danger. We are also exposed to hurricanes, to floods, to droughts, to landslides, to coastal erosion and rising sea levels. A single storm can destroy an entire country. It can damage farms, roads, water systems, electricity supplies, markets, and homes at the same time. You know, we've heard about big hurricanes hitting the United States, like when Katrina hit Louisiana, New Orleans, and when Hurricane Sandy, I think it was, hit the east coast of the United States of America. As catastrophic as those hurricanes were, it was only one small part of the US that was damaged. Life went on for the rest of the country. And the rest of the country was able to help that state that was impacted or that city that was impacted. We don't get that in the Caribbean. When a hurricane hits an island, the entire infrastructure, the entire system is damaged. When Hurricane Maria hit Dominica, there was no part of Dominica that could help the other part out. The entire country was suffering the impacts of Hurricane Maria. Same thing with Irma. When Irma hit the BVI, that is what you see. Because our economies are so small, the damage that is caused by one major event affects the entire country. And also, sometimes what you find is because of the way these weather systems move, you could find one weather system impacting more than one island at a time. So it makes it difficult for one island to help the other because that island may be in as bad a state as the other island. So that is why for us in the Caribbean, climate change is not a distant issue. It is not something that will happen sometime in the future. It is something that is already affecting our lives and our livelihoods. But climate change hits the Caribbean differently. Caribbean countries face two connected types of climate risk. The first is the direct impact of climate change, and that includes the things we've been talking about already: drought, flooding, heat, hurricanes, landslides, and crop damage. The second is less visible and not very often spoken about. In fact, most people don't even recognize it as a risk that is caused by climate change. The fact is, our countries import many of the things that we need, including food, the things that you need to run your farm: fuel, fertilizer, animal feed, equipment, packaging, and construction materials. All of these things are imported into our region. Very few of these things are actually manufactured in the Caribbean. So when climate change disrupts production or shipping in another part of the world, we often experience shortages and, unfortunately, higher prices in the Caribbean. This means that climate change can affect us even when the hurricane, the drought, or the flood is happening or has happened somewhere else. Our farms and our food security are connected to the wider Caribbean economy and to the global economy. But climate change does not stop at our borders. Let's consider a very simple example. Supposing a major drought affects a country that produces corn or soya, or doesn't have to be a drought, it could be some of the very bad forest fires that we're seeing in some parts of the world right now. The harvest will be smaller. Because corn and soya are used in animal feed, the price of feed may increase. In fact, almost likely the price of animal feed will increase. That increase is then felt by poultry farmers, by pig farmers, by broiler producers in the Caribbean. Here's another example. A hurricane may damage a major port or interrupt a shipping route. Seeds, fertilizers, machinery parts, or packaging material may be delayed because you are depending on something coming from somewhere else. Some could be from China, could be from somewhere else, and there's a major storm or something has impacted that area, and you now find that those shipments are delayed. And so even when the hurricane or the extreme weather event does not hit your island, your farming costs may still increase. So that's why climate change must be understood as both a local challenge and a global challenge. Caribbean farmers are doubly exposed to climate change. They face what we call a double exposure. The first exposure is what happens directly on your farm, and this includes heat, drought, excess rainfall, flooding, soil erosion, pests, diseases, hurricane damage. The second exposure is what happens around the farm but impacts you. Higher fuel prices, higher fertilizer costs, more expensive animal feed, delays in supply, higher food prices, increased insurance costs. Well, that's where you can get insurance. I know for most farmers, it's impossible to get insurance, and that is something that we really must do something about. I know we've been speaking about it for the longest while, but it is what makes it very difficult for you, because it means that anytime there is a hit from a hurricane or something, you now have to bear those costs to get back on your feet. And that really is something that has to be addressed. We've been speaking about it for the longest while, but you cannot have a proper farming sector, a proper agriculture sector, value added in the agriculture sector, if there is no insurance available to farmers and agro producers. Reduce access to credit and weaker markets. So farmers have to manage both environmental risks and economic risks. So building resilience for you, building resilience to climate change means preparing for both the environmental risk and the economic risk. So let's look at some of the impacts that we spoke about already, and let's without becoming too technical, let's see how that is or will impact you. First is hotter temperatures. Well, higher temperatures will affect your crops, your livestock, but also affect your farm workers and yourself. You are spending time out in the field. The field is 30, 32 degrees Celsius. You have no cover. You're not like me. If I go out, I have a vegetable garden. If I go out and I do some work in my vegetable garden, it gets too hot, I come back into my air condition in my office. I have that luxury. I can do that. You don't have that luxury. When you're out in your farm, whatever you're doing, if you are clearing land, if you are planting seeds, if you are doing some other form of crop husbandry, if you're tending to your animals, you are out in that open. There is no shelter for you. And that is making farming very, very uncomfortable, if not very unhealthy. Some crops do not perform well under extreme heat. Their flowers may fall before the fruit develops, because it's just so hot that you have flower drop taking place. If the flower falls, there's no fruit being set, you don't have a yield. Crops may mature too quickly because the temperature is so hot that you're getting crops maturing too quickly, and you get smaller harvests or you get lower quality. Vegetables such as lettuce, tomatoes, sweet peppers, and cucumbers may experience heat stress. Livestock can also suffer because the cows, the goats, the sheep, we know broilers and layers are particularly sensitive to heat. They can also suffer. Heat stress will cause animals to eat less, to grow more slowly, and produce less milk or fewer eggs, and in some instances can cause them to die. As I said, farm workers and farmers are also affected. Working for long hours in extreme heat can cause dehydration, exhaustion, and illness. Therefore, as farmers, you may need to adjust your working hours, provide shade, increase access to water. All of these things will cost money. Providing shade, increasing access to water, adjusting working hours, all of these things have a financial impact on you as a farmer, but these are things that you will have to now consider, or selecting crops or varieties that can tolerate hotter conditions. You also have less predictable rainfall. Now, climate change impacts rainfall in a kind of strange way. You could have longer droughts, more pronounced droughts, but you could also have more intense rainfall, and I'll get into that in a while. So, you may have traditionally planned your planting around the rainy season and the dry season, because for many of us, our agriculture is rain-fed. We don't have irrigation. A lot of us don't have irrigation, so we depend on the rains to provide us with that irrigation that our plants need, our crops need to grow. But these seasons are becoming more difficult to predict. We are supposed to be in our rainy season. Say that to the people and farmers of St. Lucia right now. They are not in any rainy season right now, and they are suffering. And I'm sure the same holds for St. Vincent and Grenada and St. Kitts and Nevis and Antigua and Barbuda, wherever you may be farming. The rains will come, or they do come later than expected. You may plant seeds after the first rainfall. You see some rain and you figure, okay, The season has broken, we have rainfall, so let me now put my seeds in, only for several dry weeks to follow. And we've seen that in St. Lucia in recent times. At other times, too much rain may fall in a short period. This can wash away seeds, can damage young plants, flood your fields, and prevent you from reaching, even prevent you sometimes from accessing your land. Less predictable rainfall makes planning on your farm much more difficult. It also increases the importance of water storage, of drainage, of weather information, and careful timing. So water is one of the most important resources on any farm. Longer and more frequent droughts can reduce crop yields, can damage fruit trees, and increase the cost of production. I posted something on Facebook, I think it was yesterday, that two trees that I had in my backyard, two of my treasured trees, a bilimbi tree, bilimbi, a soury tree, and a golden apple tree, a pomsite tree, did not survive this drought. They were both killed by this drought. I also have a big salmon tree. Well, I have two big salmon trees in my front yard. One of them died. It didn't die from this year because the salmon tree is a big tree and it takes a lot to kill it, but it started being impacted by the drought in 2022. Then 2023 got worse. 2024, it got significantly worse. And the drought of 2025 was what eventually killed it. And we're talking about a big tree that is what, maybe like 30, 40 feet in height and a wide canopy span, dead as a result of drought. You may have to purchase water or spend more money pumping and transporting it because you don't have access to water. Livestock also require reliable access to clean water. During dry periods, competition for water may increase among households because if you don't have water, it's not just your farm that needs the water, but your household needs the water. You need water for your household. But you're also competing with hotels and other businesses. I can't tell you the number of times people in St. Lucia have lamented the fact that they don't have water in their taps, but they're seeing trucks carrying water to hotels and to other businesses who can afford to pay for that water. That is something, it seems unfair, but it is a reality that we have to deal with. So, how do you resolve that? Well, you can prepare by harvesting rainwater, installing storage tanks, using drip irrigation, mulching, and choosing crops that require less water. I'll speak a little bit more about that in a while. But the important lesson there is that as much water as you can save during the rainy season, you need to, because that can make a major difference for you during the dry season. But another impact of climate change is heavy rainfall and flooding. Climate change can produce both drought and excessive rainfall. When rain falls very heavily, the soil may not be able to absorb it quickly enough. This can lead to flooding, to landslides, and soil erosion. Heavy rainfall can wash away topsoil, wash away seeds, wash away fertilizer and organic matter. It can also damage roads and prevent you from transporting your produce to markets. Your farm access roads may be very, very badly damaged, if not destroyed, by heavy rain. Waterlogged soil may cause plant roots to rot and can encourage the growth of fungal diseases. Good drainage, contour planning, grass barriers, tree planting, and ground cover can help reduce these risks. But bare soil is especially vulnerable. So as much as possible, you should try to keep your soil covered wherever and whenever possible. Then, of course, there are the stronger hurricanes and tropical storms that we have to deal with. And the reason we are dealing with stronger hurricanes is because the oceans have so much heat energy in them. The heat we're experiencing is not just being experienced on land, it is also being experienced in the oceans. Our oceans are absorbing that heat. And the more heat energy the oceans absorb is the more energy the hurricanes and the storms have to feed off when they are developing in the Atlantic. So a hotter ocean means the likelihood of a stronger hurricane. It does not mean more frequent hurricanes, and that's an error that people often make. They say, well, climate change will lead to more frequent hurricanes. It won't. What climate change will lead to is stronger hurricanes and more hurricanes of the category 4 and category 5 nature that we're seeing these days. Before, you get one Cat 5 hurricane, let's say every 5 years or so. Now, almost every year, you get a category 5 or category 4 hurricane. That's what we have to be dealing with. And these hurricanes develop so quickly. They move from tropical storm to Cat 5 in the space of 12 hours. We saw that in 2023, I think it was in Mexico, where tropical storm Otis developed from being tropical storm Otis to Cat 5 hurricane Otis in 12 hours. And so by the time it hit, I think it was Acapulco in Mexico, where they were preparing for a tropical storm, they got hit by a Category 5 hurricane. Um, these stronger hurricanes will uproot fruit trees, they'll flatten crops, they'll damage greenhouses, they will destroy irrigation systems, and they can also kill livestock. Farm roads, bridges, and markets may also be damaged. Even when crops survive, you may not be able to transport your produce. So again, as part of this in this presentation, in addition to speaking about the risk, I'm also speaking about at the same time some of the things you can do to mitigate or to lessen those risks. So preparation is essential. Before the hurricane season, you should clear your drains, secure your equipment, strengthen your animal shelters, prune any vulnerable trees, particularly your tree crops, protect your seeds and your records, your farm records. They're extremely important. Make sure that you have these in waterproof areas and in places that are not likely to get waterlogged and flooded. Identify safe storage areas, and extremely important, develop an emergency plan. No farm can be completely protected from a powerful hurricane, but good preparation can reduce losses and support faster recovery. Pests and diseases are another thing that we're beginning to see more of, and different pests and diseases as temperatures are getting warmer and rainfall patterns are changing, because that is creating more favorable conditions for pests, for weeds, and plant diseases. Some insects reproduce more quickly in hotter weather. Wet conditions encourage fungal diseases, as I said earlier, while drought can weaken plants and make them more vulnerable. You may also encounter pests that were previously uncommon in your area. The response should not always be to use more chemicals or more pesticides. Integrated pest management can sometimes be more effective and certainly less expensive. And this includes monitoring your crops regularly, removing infected plants, rotating your crops, using resistant varieties if you could find them, encouraging beneficial insects, improving soil health, and using pesticides carefully and only when necessary. Early detection is one of the best forms of protection against pests and diseases. As women farmers, you are central to food production and rural life across the Caribbean. Many women manage small farms, you sell produce in local markets, you prepare food for your households, and you care for children and elderly family members. You multitask. I think when they were talking about multitasking, women, particularly women farmers, invented that term multitask because of the number of things you do. But when farming income falls, women face pressure from several directions at once. You may have less money to support your household, while food, transport, and electricity costs are increasing. So for this reason, supporting women farmers is not only an agricultural issue, and this is something that we keep trying to explain to governments to get them so that they get it. Supporting women farmers is not only an agricultural issue. It is about economic independence. It is about family health. It is about gender equality. It is about community resilience, and it is about food security. When women farmers become more resilient, entire communities and countries become stronger. And that is why the work that you're doing and the work that Helen's Daughters is doing is so important. But women should not only be described as victims of climate change, because that's not what you are. You're not just victims of climate change. Women are already finding creative ways to respond. And that's something that you do every single day. You are diversifying your crops, you're processing food, you're saving seeds, you're forming groups like Helen's Daughters, you're sharing knowledge. And I've seen this with the Helen's Daughters community, sharing knowledge among each other and using new technologies. Women also carry valuable traditional knowledge about plants, about soil, about food preparation, about medicine, and about medicinal plants, which is a skill, a resource that we are losing because we are not passing it enough on to the next generation, and about household management. And I'll speak about traditional knowledge a little bit more in a while. Traditional knowledge, this knowledge has to be combined with modern science and technology. Women farmers have to be, and I stress this, and I know I'm speaking to you, the converted, and really who I should be speaking to are the governments, and I do tell them that when I speak to them. Women farmers must be included in decisions about land, about water, about finance, about agricultural policy, and particularly about disaster recovery, because you are at the center of disaster recovery. You're not simply beneficiaries of climate solutions, you are designers and leaders of those solutions. Climate change is impacting food security in a big way. Again, this is something that you know. The Caribbean imports a large amount of the food that it consumes. This makes the region very vulnerable to global price increases, shipping delays, and disruptions in other countries. Climate change can make imported food more expensive and less reliable. However, in addition to being a challenge, this also creates an opportunity. The challenge, of course, is that local farmers face climate risks and higher costs, but the opportunity is that stronger local agriculture can reduce our dependence on imports by producing more fruits and being given incentives and the right conditions to produce more fruits, more vegetables, more herbs, more root crops, more eggs, more fish and livestock products locally. You are helping to improve food security and keep money within our region. So instead of all of this money that we are spending importing expensive and sometimes not that healthy food products from other countries outside of the Caribbean, we should be depending more on our local producers to supply us with that healthy, nutritious food that we need. Every productive and resilient farm contributes to national and regional food security. And I think that's the point that we need to get across. Every productive and resilient farm in our country, in our community, contributes to national and also to regional food security. But when we talk about climate smart agriculture, what are we talking about? You know, it's a term you hear all the time. What is climate smart agriculture? Well, climate smart agriculture means farming in ways that achieve three broad goals. The first goal is to maintain or increase production. The second is to help farmers and farms adapt to climate change. And the third is to reduce harm to the environment wherever possible. In practical terms, climate smart agriculture may include conserving water, improving soil, planting trees, diversifying crops, using weather information, reducing waste, extremely important. And there, you know, we can talk about composting, for example, and reusing your kitchen waste, protecting biodiversity, using renewable energy, selecting resilient crop varieties. Climate smart agriculture is not about one single farming method. It is a set of practical approaches that farmers can choose based on their crops, their location, their resources, and their needs. If I leave you with no other message today, I want to leave you with the message that a healthy soil is a healthy farm. Healthy soil is one of the strongest forms of climate protection. Soil that contains organic matter can hold more water during dry periods. It can also absorb rainfall more effectively and reduce runoff during heavy rainfall. Farmers like yourself can improve soil by using compost, by using animal manure that has been properly treated, not raw animal manure, as you know, but animal manure that has been properly treated. Crop residues, cover crops, mulch, by engaging in crop rotation. Healthy soil also supports beneficial organisms and can reduce the need for expensive fertilizer. Soil should be treated as a living resource. I cringe, and I can't tell you how much I cringe every time I hear somebody refer to soil as dirt. It bothers me. And I think that is one of the reasons people don't understand, and farmers don't do it. It's not something I ever hear from a farmer. But you know, somebody will tell me, "Oh, I want to plant something in a pot there, or I want to put some herbs. Where can I get some dirt?" I tell them, "I don't know where you can get some dirt. I guess you could probably sweep around your house and get some dirt. If you don't know where you can get some soil, I can help you there. But we don't grow crops in dirt. We grow crops in soil." And that's a message I always get across to people. Soil is valuable. Dirt is not valuable. When we protect the soil, we protect the long-term productivity of the farm. Mulching is another very important practice that we need to engage in. Mulching involves covering the soil around your plants. The material that you use can be dry grass, it can be leaves, it could be straw, it could be coconut husk, any suitable organic material. And mulching provides several benefits. One, it helps the soil retain moisture, it reduces weed growth, it protects against erosion, and it keeps plant roots cooler. Also, as organic mulch breaks down, it adds nutrients and organic matter to the soil. During dry periods, mulch can reduce the amount of water that evaporates because you're covering that soil. So the amount of water that is evaporating out because it is so hot and dry, that is reduced by mulching. But during heavy rain, it can also reduce the force of the water that is hitting the soil and helping to address some soil erosion that you might experience, and some of the runoff that would cause you to lose that soil. Mulching is therefore one of the simplest and most affordable climate adaptation practices that is available to farmers. Water management is extremely important. And I don't think that is a message that I need to give to you because I'm sure every single one of you lives this every single day. As farmers, you must think about water as something to collect, to store, to protect, and to use efficiently. Rainwater harvesting systems can collect water from roofs and direct it into tanks or other storage containers. One of my hobbies is growing orchids. I love orchids. I have a large collection of orchids. The only way my orchids survive the dry season, particularly because I live in the driest part of St. Lucia, I live in the north of the island, is through rainwater harvesting. I have 14,000 gallons of rainwater storage. I have more rainwater storage than I have Wasco storage. Wasco is the water company. I have my cistern probably holds, I think, 8,000 gallons, but my rainwater harvesting storage is 14,000 gallons. It takes a very long and bad dry season for me to not have water to water my orchids. And that's because during the rainy season, enough rain falls in my part of the island, although it is the driest part of the island, for me to collect and store in 14,000 gallons of storage, 10 1,000 gallon storage tanks and 10 400-gallon storage tanks. So rainwater harvesting is extremely important. Drip irrigation delivers water directly to the roots of your plants and allows you to use less water than sprinklers or hoses. And again, as this is something that I would highly recommend. Watering early in the morning or later in the afternoon can reduce evaporation. You should also repair leaks, monitor water use, and group your crops according to your water needs. The goal is not only to find more water, it is to get more value from every single liter of water that is available. Diversification is also important. Depending on one crop can be very risky, as you know very well as farmers. If that crop is damaged by drought, by disease, by a storm, or drop in market price, you will lose most of your income. Diversification means producing a mixture of crops, livestock, or value-added products. A farmer may combine vegetables, herbs, fruit trees, root crops, poultry, or even beekeeping. Different crops respond differently to weather conditions. Some may tolerate drought, while others perform better during wetter periods. Diversification can also create income at different times of the year. You know, we've all heard the saying, do not put all your eggs in one basket. Well, one of the best ways of developing resilience to climate change is by diversifying your production. Agroforestry and trees on farms also helps. And agroforestry means combining trees with crops or livestock. Trees can provide shade, they can protect crops from strong winds, they can reduce soil erosion because their roots bind that soil together, particularly for those of you who are farming on hillsides, and they can improve water retention. They may also produce fruit, timber, fodder, spices, or medicinal products. Examples of tree crops that you could use are coconut, mango, breadfruit, avocado, cocoa, citrus, any suitable species. The type of tree and its location must be carefully planned so that it does not compete excessively with your crops, the crops that you depend on. It does not compete with them for light, for nutrients, or for water. You can't put a massive canopy that would mean that your vegetables are now not getting sufficient light for them to photosynthesize, or that whatever you've planted is now competing with your vegetables or your root crops for water. Well-managed trees can also help cool the farm and create a more stable environment and make it easier for you to farm because at least there's some shade. There's somewhere that you can go when that heat becomes unbearable on the farm. And as I said, they can provide additional sources of food and income. There's also protected agriculture. And what do I mean when I speak about protected agriculture? I'm talking about shade houses, greenhouses, and any other structures that protect crops from harsh weather. These systems can reduce damage from heavy rain, excessive sunlight, wind, and some pests. They also allow you to produce high-value crops more consistently. So, for example, tomatoes. We know the difficulty in producing tomatoes during the rainy season. Probably the only way you could have a high quality tomato crop during the rainy season is to grow those tomatoes on the greenhouse. Um, However, protected structures must be designed for Caribbean conditions. I've seen greenhouses that we've put up in some countries and in some areas that were not designed for the Caribbean and create and worsen the situation instead of improving it. A poorly constructed greenhouse may be damaged by strong winds, or it may become too hot. You don't want your greenhouse done in such a way that there is not adequate circulation of wind going through that greenhouse, because you're now creating conditions that will be impossible for any crop that you're growing in that greenhouse to survive. So you must consider the ventilation, the drainage, the maintenance costs, the water supply, and also your ability to take whatever precautionary steps are required when there's a hurricane approaching, because greenhouses are particularly vulnerable during extreme weather events like storms and hurricanes. Protected agriculture can be useful, but it must be properly planned and it must be managed. Windbreaks and farm protection are also important, and windbreaks are, as you know, rows of trees, shrubs, fencing, or other barriers that are used to reduce wind speed. As we have more and more of these heavy winds going through, you need to find a way to protect your crops from those strong winds. So your windbreaks can protect your crops, can reduce moisture loss, and limit damage during ordinary strong winds. They probably will not be of much help to you during a Cat 5 hurricane, but anything less than that, a Cat 3, a Cat 2, a tropical storm, your windbreaks will help. Windbreaks also provide habitats for birds and beneficial insects. However, they should be positioned carefully. A windbreak that is too dense may create turbulence, while unsuitable tree species, as I said earlier, may compete with crops or themselves may become dangerous during storms. You should seek technical advice when designing permanent windbreaks. The objective is to reduce exposure without creating new risks. Climate information is an extremely important farming tool. You need to have information, especially now with climate change becoming such an important factor in your ability to produce quality crops with the yield and on time and the time that you are used to. Weather and climate information should become part of everyday farm management. And I want to repeat that. Weather and climate information should become part of everyday farm management. A weather forecast can help you decide whether to plant, whether to irrigate, whether to apply fertilizer, whether to spray crops, or whether to harvest. Particularly the seasonal forecast that can indicate whether the coming months are likely to be wetter, drier, or hotter than normal. And these are produced by the Caribbean Meteorological Organization. They're produced by the Caribbean Institute for Meteorology and Hydrology. Your own Met Service might have access to that information. Use that information because it will give you an indication of what is likely to happen in the coming months. For example, we have been told that we are in the middle of a very intense El Nino. That El Nino, which is one of the strongest in recent memory, is going to cause hotter temperatures, much warmer temperatures than normal. So that is something that you have to pay attention to, because it means you may have to adjust what you plant, when you plant, and also your own exposure, because the temperatures will be extremely warm out there. Hurricane warnings will help you to secure equipment and protect livestock. And please take these seriously. Treat them seriously. Don't say, again, last time they say a hurricane was going to pass, it didn't pass me. I pay any attention to that. I'm just going to continue doing what I'm doing. It's not a precise science determining whether a hurricane will pass. So it's not like the Met system, the weather people are trying to fool you to make you go and buy more water at Massey or buy more canned tuna so that Massey can make money. No, it's just that the models that they have are suggesting that the hurricane might hit your island. So they're telling you to be prepared. If that hurricane does not hit your island, like my mother would say, make the sign of the cross with your big toe and say, okay, you know what? I'm happy it didn't happen. And I can always use that water later. That canned tuna will not go to waste. But do not use that as a premise for the next time you get a weather forecast, for you to say, me, I'm not paying attention to them people. They tired of making me hurry up and go and spend money and go and put fuel in my vehicle, and nothing happens. Treat every hurricane warning like it is a real warning, because it is, and like it is a hurricane is going to hit your island, so that you are prepared, you've secured your equipment, and you've protected your livestock. You should use reliable information from your National Med Services, from your agricultural extension officers, and recognized regional agencies like those I just spoke about. Traditional knowledge remains extremely important, but because the climate is changing, past seasonal patterns, some of the things that our parents and our grandparents noticed, are no longer as reliable as they used to be. And that is something that we need to pay attention to. So the best approach is to combine experience with current information. Renewable energy, that is something that's very near to my heart, because in addition to being an advocate for climate action, I'm also a very strong advocate for renewable energy. And particularly now, with the cost of electricity being so high in all of our islands, except we have a flag for Dominica. Before Dominica is done with commissioning its geothermal plant, the price of electricity, I've seen that I think the fuel surcharge has gone down in Dominica, where it's going up everywhere else. And that is, again, as a result of renewable energy, because of the commitment that the government made and how determined it was, particularly my good friend Vince Anderson, who has made this his almost lifelong mission to get that geothermal plant running. Renewable energy can help farmers reduce costs and improve resilience. Solar energy may be used for pumping water, for irrigation, for lighting, for refrigeration, for drying crops, for charging small equipment. Solar dryers can also help you to preserve your fruits, your herbs, your spices, and other products. Solar-powered cold storage can help you to reduce post-harvest losses and spoilage. However, the cost and maintenance requirements must be carefully considered. Renewable energy is most useful when it solves a clear farm problem and produces savings over time. Okay, don't just rush and put solar panels on your roof because you hear that solar panels will reduce your costs. You have to look at the economics of it, whether that investment, that upfront investment you're making in these solar panels, whether you can amortize that over a period of time such that your costs will go down. If your costs will not go down from installing solar panels, as much as I am an advocate for solar panels, and I have solar panels on my roof, and I can tell you my electricity bill has gone down significantly as a result of the solar panels that I have on my roof. But that's because my electricity bill was very high to begin with. If your electricity bill is not high, if your electricity bill would not benefit from putting solar panels and from making that investment, then please don't do it. Make sure you do the math. You get somebody to help you to see whether that investment makes sense for you. You may also be able to access grants, loans, or cooperative arrangements to make these technologies more affordable. Now, reducing waste and losses. A significant amount of agricultural produce may be lost before it reaches the consumer. And that's something that you know. The number of times you've had to deal with post-harvest losses from your tomatoes, from whatever crop you've produced, that is something that you have to deal with. These losses can occur during harvesting, they can occur during transportation, storage, and marketing. Hotter temperatures can make spoilage worse. And you can reduce these losses by harvesting at the correct time and stage of day, handling produce carefully, removing that field heat as quickly as possible from that produce after you've harvested it, using clean containers. I saw one of our female farmers on Facebook, I think it was yesterday or today, St. Lucian female farmers, showing the pains that she goes to ensure that she cleans all of her storage containers before harvesting to ensure that she reduces on her post-harvest losses. And that is something that we really have to pay attention to, using clean containers, because dirty containers can end up causing you more post-harvest losses than anything else. Providing shade after harvesting and improving your storage. Coordinating transportation, ensuring that as soon as you've harvested, you have transportation to take that produce to the market, as opposed to the produce sitting somewhere and stewing and baking in heat for a long period of time. And agro-processing. processing your surplus produce. That is something we do not do enough of in our region. People always talk about, oh, in the mango season, I've seen all these mangoes going to waste and we can't do anything about it. Yes, we can do something about it. Yes, we can do something about the glut, but it requires us to want to process that produce in a manner. And it's not just a matter of processing it. You don't just process it and put it in any old container and expect somebody will buy it from you. The way in which you present it to your customer also has to be in a manner that will give them sufficient comfort that this was done in a hygienic manner. And yes, I can buy that product, whether it could be a jam, it could be a jelly, it could be a sauce, whatever. So presentation is extremely important. Produce that cannot be sold fresh may sometimes be transformed into sauces, into jams, into dried products, juices, seasonings, or other value-added items. I can't tell you the number of times. One of my favorite places to shop when I'm in the US is Whole Foods, because you get good, wholesome food there. But the other thing that you get there is a lot of value-added product from commodities that are available in our countries, in our region. So you'll find soursop tablets, because soursop is supposed to be a very strong anti-carcinogen. You will find turmeric. As children, and those of us who live in St. Lucia or in Dominica, we probably know turmeric as chichima. Our parents gave it to us as an anti-inflammatory. And this is something that we knew for generations and generations and generations. Well, guess what? North America and Europe just recently learned about the anti-inflammatory qualities of turmeric and ginger, and they're now packaging it not as raw turmeric or as raw ginger, but as tablets and as powders that they're selling. All of these things are things that we can use. Things like what we call kokomkuli, bitter gourd. These are things that you go into Whole Foods and you pay a lot of money for. All of that is value added to products that we have in our region that we can very easily be processing and selling it in our region, in our hotels, and maybe to some Whole Foods or Holland and Barrett in the UK. These are things that we need to pay attention to. Adding value to many of the products that we have. Reducing waste can increase income without requiring more land. So that is one easy way to increase income without you having to purchase more land. You just convert more of what normally is waste, more of that harvest that you do not use, into a product, but make sure you do it properly. Don't wait for the mangoes to fall and they're on the ground, and then you now take them and you're now going to convert it into mango chutney or something. Harvest the mangoes the same way you'd harvest them for you to sell it as a primary commodity. If there's a saying, garbage in, garbage out. If you put rubbish in and you process it, if you put sub-quality product in and you process it, you'll get a sub-quality agro-processed product. So ensure that the product that you're harvesting is a good quality product. Building business resilience is extremely important. And climate resilience is not only about farming techniques. It's also about how you manage your farm as a business. You really should keep very meticulous records of your expenses, your sales, your yields, your losses, your labor, the weather events that you've experienced, your planting and harvesting dates, even what the conditions were like when you planted. Because you may find that, okay, you put in some seedlings or some seeds and they just are not performing the way they are used to performing. Well, you might find it's because of the time that you planted them, the conditions that you planted, but you didn't pay any attention to that. You didn't record it. So please keep meticulous records of everything that goes on your farm, because those records can sometimes mean the difference between profit and loss. These records can help you to identify which crops are profitable and which practices are working. They can also support your applications for loans, for grants, for insurance, or government assistance. If you don't have records, then you don't have any way of proving that you are running a profitable business, or you are running a business that has potential, and that government or the bank or somebody should invest in you. You can't just go to them and say, yes, I'm a farmer and I'm a really good farmer, and trust me, I'm a good farmer. That's not enough. You have to show that you're a good farmer. And how you show that you're a good farmer is by having records, is by showing that you know the true cost of production before you set a selling price. A farm that is environmentally resilient but financially weak will struggle to survive. And I want to repeat that. A farm that is environmentally resilient, but financially weak, and particularly one that has weak or no farm records, will struggle to survive. You also need to diversify your farm income. And as farmers, you can build resilience to climate change by developing more than one source of income. So possible opportunities include selling seedlings. What's stopping you from selling seedlings? You can, in addition to seedlings that you put down in the ground yourself, you could also sell seedlings to some of your fellow farmers. You could produce compost that you can now package and sell, not just to farmers, but to small backyard gardeners, to somebody who might want to do a few containers, some container gardening. You could sell that compost to them by processing food, by offering farm tours. More and more people want to engage in ecotourism. You can, by making one or two small additions, you can make your farm some place that a tourist might want to visit. And we're not just talking about the tourists that are coming off the cruise ships, but there are a lot of tourists who are now staying in Airbnbs in our country. You can now market your farm to them, selling herbs and spices, supplying restaurants or hotels, creating weekly produce boxes. Many people want produce boxes, so you could do that. You could produce a weekly you could also provide training, or develop branded products. And I've seen that again with the farmers market that Helen's Daughters does every fortnight. I've seen an increasing number of branded products from farmers that really increase the marketability and the appeal of these products. Now, these options will not be suitable for every farmer. So I'm not saying every farmer should go and do that. The right choice depends on the available land, on the skills, on the market, on your access to finance, and also on the time that you have available to you. Not every farmer has the time to do all of these things. There's some farmers, and I know you toil from dusk to dawn, and when you get off your farm, the most you can do is go home, do whatever household chores you need to do, and go to sleep so that you can wake up the next day to do it. So some of these things might not be possible, but maybe you might have children that can help you do it. Maybe you might have relatives that can help you do that. So don't just look at your farm enterprise as just you. There are people who might be interested in coming and helping to give you a helping hand, to help you to diversify your farm income. The important point is to avoid depending entirely on one product or one buyer. Working together is extremely important. And again, this is why I love Helen's Daughters. Many of the challenges that farmers face are very difficult, sometimes impossible to resolve individually. Farmer groups, cooperatives, and networks can help members purchase supplies in bulk, reduce transport costs, access larger markets, share equipment, obtain training, negotiate better prices because you're selling in bulk, apply for funding, share climate information. The only reason the Windward Islands for many, many years had a successful banana industry and a successful banana export industry was because we combined the production of Grenada, whilst it was still in bananas until Moco disease wiped them out, Grenada, Dominica, St. Vincent, and St. Lucia. That's the only way we were able to supply bananas to Tesco, to Sainsbury's, to Marks and Spencer, to Waitrose, and to Asda, the major supermarkets that we were supplying in the United Kingdom. Any one island, even St. Lucia, that at one point was producing, I think in the year 1992, St. Lucia produced 120,000 tons of bananas. Not even that would have been enough to keep those markets going. We needed to do that as a group of countries working together. The same thing holds for you as a farmer. You are much stronger when you work together. And again, this is something that Helen's Daughters has shown. We do not have a good record of farmer cooperatives in my country. I don't know what it's like in some of the other islands, but in St. Lucia, we don't have a good record of farmer cooperatives, and Helen's Daughters is one of the success stories. It's not a farmer cooperative in the traditional sense, but it does everything a farmer cooperative would do. In fact, it does sometimes more than what some of the farmer cooperatives did. Working together is especially valuable for small women farmers who may not have large volumes of produce on their own. Cooperation does not mean every farmer must operate in the same way. It means identifying areas where joint action produces greater benefits. Regional cooperation matters, as I just spoke about. climate change it doesn't respect national borders. Climate change does not say, you know what, I like St. Lucia more than I like St. Vincent or more than I like Dominique. It just treats everybody the same way. It treats every country the same way. And even the people in the UK who thought, and in the US and in Europe, who thought that climate change was something that small islands and vulnerable countries and least developed countries had to deal with, they're finding out that it's not the case. I was in the UK last month. Was it in June, I think? Not last month. I was in UK in June for London Climate Week. I have never experienced temperatures like I experienced in London that week. We talk about temperatures of 36 degrees Celsius. I've never seen that in my country. But that is now the result of climate change. A lot of the forest fires we're seeing around the world is as a result of climate change. Caribbean countries need to cooperate in order to deal with climate change. Regional cooperation can support things like seed banks, emergency food supplies, sharing research. So what you do in one country, sharing it with other countries. And again, that's one of the reasons that I think Helen's Daughters has done so well, is that while it started off in St. Lucia, it's now branched off to other islands. And you're now sharing that love, sharing that research, sharing that information, sharing that knowledge across the Caribbean. And that is so important. Climate resilient crop varieties. If you found that there's a particular crop variety that works well in a particular country because it's resistant to drought or it's resistant to higher temperatures, then sharing that information so that we can now make use of that crop variety. Regional markets, agricultural insurance is something that we really should be looking at on a regional basis. We had it for bananas when we had wind crop. We have not been able to replicate it since. Disaster response, training, climate finance, all of these things are ways in which we can ensure that by cooperating, we can deal with the situation better. A pest or disease entering one island may soon reach another, and we've seen that so many different times. A disruption in shipping will affect several countries at once. By sharing information, by sharing resources, and sharing expertise, Caribbean countries can respond more effectively. A stronger regional farming network means a stronger Caribbean. Government resources and climate disasters, and particularly government response to climate disasters, is extremely important. After a hurricane, flood, or drought, governments often must spend large amounts of money on recovery. They may need to repair roads, they may need to repair bridges, hospitals, schools, water systems, and electricity networks. This can reduce the amount of money that is available for long-term agricultural investments. So projects such as irrigation systems, even farm roads, extension services, storage facilities, the government will not be able to spend the type of money it should be spending after a hurricane because it has to divert that money elsewhere. But that does not mean that farmers should expect no government support. It means that resilience is a shared responsibility. Governments, farmers, businesses, development partners, and communities all have important roles to play. And if there's one area I think we've really lapsed in, and I'm not saying this as you farmers, I'm saying us as countries, is to get the private sector to be much more involved and invested in agriculture and in food security in our countries. We have to get the business community to understand that if we do not have a stable farm environment, if we don't have a stable agricultural sector, we will not have a stable business sector. Because these same farmers are the ones who, by their reduced income, are not able to spend money in these shops, in these businesses that depend on them. The Hilux will not buy if there's no money being made on the farm. So these are some of the things that we have to understand. Climate finance and support is extremely important. There's increasing international funding that is available for climate adaptation, for sustainable agriculture, for renewable energy, and disaster resilience. However, and this is a big however with a capital H, small farmers will find it very difficult to access this finance. Applications are complicated. The application process is complicated. And farmers may need land documents, business records, quotations, and project plans. And even that may not be enough, particularly if you're applying for climate finance, because you need to be able to show that the problem you're trying to solve with the finance is a problem that was caused by climate change. And there's no way you can do that if you do not have farm records that date back a significant number of years. So you can show that, let's say 10 years ago, this area where you're farming, the amount of rainfall in this area was X amount, And in the last 10 years, that amount has gone down significantly to the point where it is now. So you have a serious water deficit situation on your farm, which is why you need to make this big investment now in water storage and in drip irrigation. Or the river that you depended on for irrigation, that the stream flow in that river is now 1/10 of what it used to be before. So you must have access to information for you to be able to access climate finance. Farmer organizations and programs such as the Ag-Cademy can help you become better prepared to access these opportunities. As farmers, you should seek information from your agricultural ministries, from your development banks, from your credit unions, and if possible, through Helen's daughters. It will not be possible for you to approach a donor individually, but again, Helen's daughters can make that intervention on your behalf to see what is available and are there any small loans, highly concessional loans, but even more important, grant funding that you would be eligible for. Access to finance is important, but the finance has to be affordable and appropriate for your needs. So it's not just that, okay, the finance is available, but if that finance is not appropriate for your needs, then really it's not doing what it's supposed to be doing. Emergency and insurance and emergency planning is extremely important. Farm recovery, the recovery of your farm after a storm, begins before the storm. You cannot start preparing for what happens and the recovery that you will need after the storm when that storm happens. You have to prepare for that eventuality before. Now, agricultural insurance, where you can get it, can help farmers recover after major losses. It is a conversation I've been having with the Caribbean Catastrophe Risk Insurance Facility, CRIF, how we can have parametric insurance, parametric micro insurance for farmers, so that you don't need an assessor to come on your farm and to see how many of your plants have been damaged, how much of your livestock you have lost. The same way CRIF gives a payout to governments based on how heavy, how strong the winds were, or how much rainfall fell in the country during a particular period of time. CRIF does not send assessors into islands after the passage of a hurricane to determine whether that island is eligible for a payout. What it does, it looks at the parameters. That's why it's called parametric insurance. It looks at the parameters: how much rainfall fell, how much wind, what was the strength of the winds, and then it makes a payout. So the payout that it made to Jamaica, the record payout that it made to Jamaica, $90+ million after the passage of Hurricane Melissa. Not one person visited Jamaica to verify that. They knew how much rainfall fell in Jamaica during that period of time. They knew what was the strength of the winds, and they made a payout based on that. We should be able to do the same thing with agricultural parametric microinsurance. If we know what the wind strengths were and how much rainfall fell in a particular area, it should be possible to make payouts to farmers so that at least you can get back on your feet. The money that you need for clearing your farms, for putting yourself back together, you can get access to that. You will not be able to get all the money that you need to go back to where you were before, to bounce back, or as we say, bounce forward. But at least the money that you need to do your farm clearing and to get back on your feet, that should be accessible to you through parametric microinsurance. And this is something that, like I said, I've been speaking to the CEO of CRIF, Mr. Isaac Anthony, about, and I noticed something that they are looking at, but the sooner we can do it, the better, because insuring your farm where you can get it will be expensive, and in most instances, it is unavailable. So you should explore whatever available options and understand clearly what is being covered. Every farm, and that's why I say recovery from a hurricane or storm begins before the storm. Every farm should have a basic emergency plan, and that plan should identify the important contact numbers, the people that you need to get in touch with. Your safe locations, if you're a livestock farmer, safe locations for your livestock. If your livestock, particularly your cows, are in an area that get flooded, where can you put these cows? Where can you put those small ruminants, your sheep, your goats? Where can you put your pigs so that they are not flooded and drowned? Where can your tools and chemicals be stored? You don't want your fertilizers and your pesticides in a place where, again, will get flooded and you will lose them. And even worse, in the case of pesticides, those pesticides now getting into the water supply. How will you secure your water? How will your farm records be protected? You must ensure that these farm records are protected so that you do not lose your farm records in a flood, in a hurricane. And what should be done before a storm? What do you need to do to prepare before a storm? Preparation will not prevent all the losses, but it can make recovery faster and less stressful. And you should also know what immediately after the storm, what are some of the things that you need to do? What is your checklist of things to check on? Local production is climate action. So all of the things I've been speaking about, how we respond to climate change. One of the best ways of responding to climate change is by increasing local food production, because local food production builds resilience by reducing dependence on imports and strengthening rural livelihoods. I lived and worked in Dominica for 6 months after the passage of Hurricane Maria, and I can tell you, when I landed in Dominica, on that ferry, I could not believe what I was seeing, because Dominica is an island I know very well. It's one of my favorite islands after St. Lucia, because of how natural it is, how beautiful it is. When I got to Dominica, there was not one coconut tree that was looking anything but like a matchstick. All the tree crops were down. All the banana plants had been flattened. I could not believe what I was seeing. But you know what saved Dominica? Their root and tuber crops. When you went to the market, that's what you're getting, an abundance of root and tuber crops. That is what food security looks like. Food security means that after you're able to provide food for yourself, regardless what the circumstances are. So farmers still need consistent production, quality standards, and reliable markets. You must be able to produce consistently, meet quality standards. Consumers, supermarkets, hotels, restaurants, schools, and governments all have a role to play in supporting local agriculture. Local production is climate action. Our school feeding program in all of our islands should be based on local production. All the food that we provide to our children in these schools should be based on local production. I remember a minister when I was in a previous life, I was a permanent secretary in the Ministry of Agriculture. And I remember speaking to the Minister of Agriculture and saying to him, sorry, the Minister of Education, and saying to him that I had this plan where we would approach FAO and see whether FAO would support us in putting in maybe a couple of big agro-processing facilities in the north and in the south of the island, where we would buy produce from our farmers, convert that produce into nutritious meals, and get them properly packaged and distributed to the schools around the island. That way, we'll wipe out hunger in our schools. We'll ensure that we're also dealing with childhood obesity, which is becoming a problem because of all of the junk our children were eating. And we'll be giving our farmers income because we would be buying produce from our farmers to supply the school feeding program. The minister said to me he agreed entirely with me. However, many parents were saying to him that they did not want their children to come to school to eat the same food that they were eating at home. I was floored. I was shocked that the children in school did not want to be eating the yam and the dasheen and the green fig that they were eating at their homes. At least their parents did not want them to be eating that, the same nutritious food. And I said, okay, so what? They want to be fed ramen. They want to be fed pasta. They want to be fed, I don't understand. They want to be fed rice that has very little nutritional value. But, that's the type of thinking that we have to get past. We have to get past this thinking that our own is not good enough, particularly when it is very possible to convert yam and dasheen and sweet potato into a pie that tastes much better than macaroni and cheese, or much better than anything that you could get from any pasta that you are cooking. But again, some of the biggest impediments to local production is our thinking that local production is not as good as imported production. Earlier, I spoke of traditional knowledge. That is extremely important. Caribbean farmers, as farmers, you have valuable knowledge that is being passed on through generations. This includes knowledge about planting seasons, about seed selection, about moon phases when you plant. And many people scoff at it, but don't understand that planting according to the moon is extremely important, particularly in dealing with the behavior of certain animals and certain insects, certain pests and diseases, that depending on when you cut bamboo, according to the moon phase, will determine whether that bamboo rots or that bamboo it remains in a form that you could use, because at certain phases of the moon, the insect behavior is much more active than it is at other phases. How you manage your soil, medicinal plants. I spoke about that earlier with Holland and Barrett and Whole Foods. A lot of the things we see being sold with medicinal qualities are things that we know. And I'm going to use some of the solution names for them. Things like Veven Lachewat, things like Guenabafé, things like Chapotier. All of these things are things that immediately Toitas. All of these things that when you get a cold, your mother or your grandmother or your auntie would immediately tell you, or would immediately make a tea from it and give it to you to drink. And in no time, that cold would clear up much better than any Panadol, any ibuprofen, any NyQuil could clear it up. But we scoff at these things. We make it look as if that's not important. That's not valuable. What's more valuable is what the big pharma, what the pharmaceutical companies have produced in their labs with Pfizer and others. Now, I'm not knocking the pharmaceutical companies. I use pharmaceutical products just like anybody else. However, a lot of the products that we have in our backyard, a lot of the products that you grow on your farm are as valuable, and in some instances, even more valuable than some of these things that are being packaged and given to us. And we have to put a value on this, and that's where the traditional knowledge comes in. Food preservation, also important. Modern science, and I will never knock modern science because I'm a scientist. I did my first degree in biochemistry. I did my PhD in plant physiology. I spent a big part of my life in labs and learning and going and reading scientific textbooks. That's how I became who I am. However, modern science, it'll provide you tools and it will improve weather forecasting and all of these things, but it does not take the place of traditional knowledge for the simple reason that traditional knowledge is knowledge that has been passed on through generations and generations of observing and seeing how things react. So, if you're doing a scientific experiment, the experiment, you probably do it over the course of 6 months, 2 years. You do a couple of things, you notice them, you make sure you have all your right controls and everything, and then you present a paper. That paper then gets reviewed by other people, and they determine, okay, yeah, what you're saying that makes sense. We can publish it in a journal. That's the result of 2 years, 3 years, 5 years of research. Traditional knowledge is the result of generations of research, generations of observing what happens and what happens under our Caribbean conditions. That is as powerful as any scientific research you can do. So that's why I'm saying do not discount traditional knowledge. Do not make traditional knowledge look like it is a poor stepchild and that the one we should be paying attention to is science. They both have extremely important roles. We should not treat them as opposites. Traditional knowledge is the result of generations of study and observation of how things happen. It is one of the most rigorous forms of scientific study there is. The strongest solutions also most often come from combining the traditional knowledge with the modern science. And that's why we must preserve our traditional practices while adapting them to today's changing climates. So, reaching the end. I've been speaking a lot, and hopefully I haven't lost any of you. 5 things that you can do. 5 practical approaches actions that you can take. First, protect your soil. I said that one of the most important things I can say to you today is your soil is important. Not the dirt, the soil. The soil is important. Protect your soil, use mulch, compost, cover crops, and erosion control measures. Secondly, manage water carefully. One of the areas where climate change will have its biggest impact and is already having its biggest impact in our region is on water and the availability of water. So manage your water carefully. Harvest rainwater, repair leaks as soon as you see them, and use efficient irrigation. Thirdly, diversify. Avoid depending completely on one crop, one product, or one buyer. All 3 of them are dangerous. One buyer, if that buyer decides that, okay, but you know what, I don't want your product this week, you're now stuck. So as much as possible, diversify your crop, diversify your product, diversify your buyer, wherever you can. If you can't, then okay, but at least understand the risk associated with it. Use weather information. Check reliable forecasts before you plant, before you fertilize, before you spray, before you harvest, before you make any key decisions on your farm, because increasingly that weather is going to play a bigger and bigger role in the success or failure of your farm. And fifthly, work with farmers. Groups can improve your access to markets. It can improve, farmer groups can improve your access to finance, training, and equipment. Not every action requires a large investment. Small improvements that are introduced gradually can significantly strengthen your farm over time. Then I want you also to develop a farm resilience plan. Each of you should now start thinking about your own farm and ask yourself 3 questions. What is the greatest climate risk that is facing my farm? What is one action I can take within the next month to mitigate, to reduce that risk? And what support will I need to take that action? Your answer may involve water storage, it may involve drainage, it may involve something simple like mulching, record keeping that you're not doing right now, crop diversification, shade planting, livestock protection, or joining a farmer group if you're not yet a member of Helen's Daughters or some other group. Could be any one of these things. The goal is not to solve every problem tonight or during the next week. The goal is to identify one realistic step and begin. Okay? I'm not asking you to solve all your problems tonight, just to identify, start developing a farm resilience plan, and what do you need to make your farm more resilient. The key takeaways hopefully from this presentation tonight, 5 main ideas I would like you to remember. 1, climate change is already affecting agriculture across the Caribbean. Secondly, as farmers, you face both direct climate impacts and indirect economic impacts as a result of climate change. Thirdly, women farmers, and that's a message that really is not for you, but for everybody else, women farmers are essential to household, national, and regional food security. Without women farmers, there can be no household food security, there can be no national food security, and there can be no regional food security. Fourth, practical adaptation measures can reduce risk and improve productivity. And we spoke about some of these adaptation measures earlier, things like soil, water diversification, and also information and how you use information. All of these things can help you reduce risk. And finally, resilience is a collective. Resilience is stronger when farmers, communities, governments, and Caribbean countries work together. Caribbean climate change is a very serious problem. The climate crisis is a serious crisis, but farmers are not powerless. Knowledge, preparation, cooperation, and investment can make a meaningful difference. So, my closing message to you is climate change is not only changing the weather, it is changing the cost of farming, it is changing the availability of water, the behavior of pests, the reliability of markets, and the security of our households. But women farmers across the Caribbean have always, and I'm not just saying this because I'm speaking to you, it is a message that I always impart. Women farmers across the Caribbean have always demonstrated strength, creativity, and determination. Our mothers and grandmothers understood how to work with the land, conserve resources, raise families, and support their communities. Like I said in the beginning, you are the original multitaskers. Today, we can combine that knowledge with modern science, technology, finance, and regional cooperation. By protecting our soil, saving our water, diversifying production, using climate information, and working together, we can build farms that are more productive, more profitable, and better able to withstand climate shocks. Every resilient woman farmer strengthens her family. Every resilient farm strengthens its community, and every resilient farming community strengthens the Caribbean. So, in the question and answer session, not just that we will have now in the half an hour that we have before this comes to a close, but in your discussions among yourselves, I want you to ask yourself 4 questions. 1, what is the greatest climate-related challenge that is affecting your farm? 2, which adaptation practice discussed tonight would be most useful to you? 3, what prevents you from putting that practice in place now or in the very near future? And 4, what kind of training, finance, equipment, or policy support that provided to you would make the greatest difference? Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. If you speak Creole, merci appeal. That is the end of my presentation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fletcher, for a very, as always, informative and insightful session. There are just few comments in the Q&A box. Um, they were kind of asking, how do you treat the animal manure? How this treatment can be done?
Okay, so animal manure, you basically have to let it cure. You can't use animal manure as soon as the it has been produced by the animal, whether it's a horse or a cow. That animal manure needs to stay there for a particular period of time so that a lot of the harmful materials can be leached out of it before you use it. Because really what you want is you want to use your animal manure as a soil amendment, as something that will help you improve the quality of the soil. So raw animal manure should never be used. Doesn't matter which animal, whether it's a horse or a cow, um, even pen manure. You want to leave it to cure for a period of time before you can use it.
Thank you so much. And just some few statements from the Dominican. They're just basically saying they have a parametric insurance in Dominica. And with that, I will now head over to those persons who have their hands up because I think Miss Paris. So I'll give you permission to speak and you could go ahead.
Thank you. Can you all hear me?
We
Yes.
can.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Dr. Fletcher. That was a very outstanding and amazing presentation. I wanted to ask, you mentioned earlier in your slides the importance of balancing traditional knowledge with modern science. With organic farming, for example, at a commercial scale, it appears to require more labor, higher input costs, and greater effort, especially when all farmers are already facing challenges as climate change. Um, and you also mentioned the importance of soil protection and ensuring that there's a rich biodiversity within the soil. So, what advice would you give to farmers who are interested in practicing organic farming on a commercial scale, while protecting our soil and still remaining productive and profitable?
Yeah, great question. Organic farming, you see, there's organic farming, which we define organic farming to ourselves as we're not using pesticides, we're not using fertilizer, so we're not using anything synthetic, anything inorganic in our production. However, many of the organizations that certify organic farming require you to adhere to a particular period of that farm not having been used, not any synthetic chemicals being used on that farm for a particular period of time. So it depends. Your organic farming depends on whether you are exporting or whether you're producing for a local market. Now, that's not to say that if you were using pesticides on your farm last month and you stop using it this month, that your farm now qualifies as organic. You need to find out from I'm not sure if there's any organic certification within your country, whether the ministry has any guidelines on what would pass as organic for local consumption, but you need to determine what that is first, what period of time that you have to ensure that no synthetic pesticides, no inorganic fertilizers were used on that farm so that it qualifies as organic. But you're right, organic farming is difficult because whenever you have a pest outbreak, it's very easy to spray to get rid of that pest. It could be white fly, whatever it is. It's extremely easy to get rid of it. You can't do that now with organic farming. You have to ensure that you now meticulously go and, if you can, wash down the leaves with soapy water, maybe to get rid of the pest, or you may need to introduce a biological control. So, for example, with cabbages, and you may need to put in something like bacillus. So there are things that you need to do. It's not a one size fits all, but you are right. Organic farming is more labor intensive. Organic farming sometimes can be more costly. But the bad thing, and I'm saying this, and it really pains me, The bad thing is that we are not yet seeing in our region the premium for organic produce that we should be seeing, because organic produce is healthier produce. So it should not matter to you so much that you have to do these additional things to qualify as an organic farmer, because you will get that return when you sell your produce to the supermarket or to the hotel. Unfortunately, there is not that distinction right now. If you go to the supermarket, and I know in St. Lucia, I don't know for any of the other islands, but if you go to the supermarket in St. Lucia, you will not see organic lettuce fetching a higher price than lettuce that is not organic. You will not see cabbage that is organic fetching a higher price than cabbage that was sprayed to get rid of caterpillars. So that is something that we really need. The market needs to make that adjustment to make that change that you need to make it worth your while to do it. Organic is better, organic is healthier, but right now organic doesn't pay more, and that is the problem. So as much as I would tell you that, as you know, you should grow organic, if organic is going to cause your cost of production to go up without causing you to get a return on that investment when you sell that produce, I will tell you the most important thing for me is for you to remain a viable and a profitable farmer. So if organic will cause you to lose your market or to go broke, my dear, don't go organic. It's an ideal that we should all strive for, but we have to make sure that the market rewards organic, because organic is healthier for us. When I buy organic produce, I know I'm not consuming any pesticides, any synthetic pesticides. I know I'm not consuming any fertilizers. I know that there are no additives that were put on that crop that would cause my body to react in a particular way, that would cause me to develop an allergic reaction to something, or worse yet, at some point cause cells to multiply in my body that would cause a cancer. But you need to be compensated for that. And I think, again, that is something that we need to look at regionally. How do we develop an organic market in our region? Because that organic market exists in the US, it exists in the UK, it exists in the EU, it does not exist in the Caribbean. So that's my answer to you. Organic needs to be rewarded with better prices for organic to make sense for you. Certainly reduce on your use of pesticides and fertilizers as much as possible, because you are doing all of us a favor, but not to your detriment if it's now going to cause you to increase your cost of production and not get a better return for your product.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you. Laville, you could go ahead, please. Giselle? Okay, okay. If you're speaking, we can't hear you, but I can see that your mic is unmuted.
I was saying my
Oh.
hand wasn't up.
Oh, well, it's showing up, so I'll put it down on your behalf. Miss Peter?
Hi, good evening, all. This question is for Dr. Fletcher. He asked 4 questions in the end, but my screen was stuck. Can he repeat it, or is there a way that we can get
Sure,
those questions
but
again,
I'll
please?
also make a copy of both the text of the presentation and the presentation itself available to Helen's daughters, so that it can be shared with you. But the 4 questions were: what is the greatest climate-related challenge that is affecting your farm? The second one is, which adaptation practice that we discussed tonight would be most useful to you? The third one is, what prevents you from putting that practice in place? So that adaptation practice that will be most useful to you, what prevents you from putting it in place? And the final question is, what kind of training, finance, equipment, or policy support provided to you would make the greatest difference? You got those?
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Thank you so much. There's another question in the Q&A box. What about rabbit manure? I was told that it could be used fresh.
That I don't know, so I won't even venture an opinion on that one. I would just stay away from using any manure fresh, but I would have to check to see whether rabbit manure is one of the few manures that could be used fresh. I don't know. Good thing is Google helps answer all these questions these days, but I don't know if it can be used fresh.
Okay, thank you. How should sawdust or wood shaving be used as mulch and for composting?
Sawdust can be used as mulch very easily because it helps to um, prevent evaporation of that so when you cover the area around your plant, it's a very good mulch. Anything that really prevents that water from evaporating and protects the soil is a good mulch. I would not use sawdust as a compost. Um, because sawdust is wood. Sawdust is wood shavings. For compost, I would use organic material, any kitchen waste except animal waste. So any vegetable kitchen waste that you have, I would use it, put it in your compost bin. You could put a little bit of soil in there to help it to keep it to make it go quicker. You know, whatever organisms are in the soil can help it can make that compost turn around more quickly. Make sure that you water your compost regularly and you turn it around. You could also buy they sell these barrels that you could spin around. I have a barrel. My compost bin is actually a barrel that I can roll. So I wet it and I roll it so that the compost, the ingredients in them mix up quite a bit. But for composting, I would use organic material. I would use anything that is not animal that comes from your kitchen. I would not use sawdust for composting, but I would certainly use sawdust for mulching. Definitely.
Thank you so much. We'll head over back to those hands that are raised. Miss Paul, you can go ahead and unmute your mic.
Hi, good evening. Excellent presentation, Dr. Fletcher. I
Thank
did
you.
not hear you mention anything much about the stepchild of agriculture, that is beekeeping, though I think it is the rather most important industry, in fact, to food security. In Dominica, we do have an active cooperative. I heard you mention about the importance of cooperative. In fact, I think Dominica is the island that has the most people involved in cooperative. Maybe as soon as somebody is born, they are part of a cooperative. So that is really good. In terms of you mentioned about the greatest climate risk. In Dominica, we face sometimes heavy rainfall, as you know, it's a Caribbean island, and that affects the flow, the timeliness of the flow, and also the nectar yield on our foraging plants. So that's one of the risks that we normally face as the beekeepers. In terms of training and finance and equipment and policy, just yesterday, the Bureau of Standards had a draft consultation on a national beekeeping policy. So that is the way we are already going in Dominica. So I'm happy to say that the National Beekeepers Cooperative is really active, and we are on the right path based on your presentation this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I actually did mention beekeeping as one of the when we were talking about
Right.
diversifying. But you're right. It really merits speaking about in its own right, because beekeeping and honey now is such an important and sought after commodity that beekeeping is extremely important. And you're quite right. I mean, it's not just Dominica. Is what I love about Dominica, as I said in the beginning, Dominica is one of my favorite islands. It's the community spirit that you find in Dominica that has never left. You know, in some of our islands, particularly in St. Lucia, we've seen a reduction in that community spirit, but you have that in Dominica. You can't help but feel it everywhere you go. And you're absolutely right about the cooperatives. Where cooperatives have failed in St. Lucia, they've thrived in Dominica. And I think it's just something about the spirit of Dominican people and how community minded you are. So I'm really happy to hear that spirit is alive and well, and that your beekeepers are doing well. And yes, the plants for foraging for the bees is extremely important. And the other thing with bees, the other thing what makes bees extremely important is not just for beekeeping, but also for pollination. When you don't have bees, then you don't have pollinators, and that
That's right.
affects your yield significantly. So yes, absolutely.
What?
Thank you. We'll move on to Pemberton. You could unmute your mic now. Pemberton.
Hi, good evening.
Hi, good evening.
So I had a question regarding the use of dish soap because some of the dish soap that we see tend to be colored, and I know these are artificial colors, and I'm thinking, wouldn't those same ingredients harm the plant? Because even if you spray them on the leaves, more than likely they're gonna drip onto the soil where the roots could take up some of those. So I was wondering, is there another way to combat these pests, especially I think is those white insects that attack tomatoes that they hide
The,
under the leaves. I think they call them aphids.
mhm.
What's
The
another
use of
way
what though?
to
The use of what did you say?
this soap? You were mentioning that earlier.
Oh, soap. Oh, soap. Okay. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, so I
Yeah.
was thinking if there's another way to go about that because my concern is really just trying to avoid anything that could be going into the soil that the plant can take up and then go into the fruit itself.
Yes, you're right. Soapy water has been used for dealing with aphids. But I guess the ladybird beetle is probably your best predator for dealing with beetles. Ladybird, sorry, for dealing with aphids. Ladybird beetles love aphids, both the adults and the larva of the ladybird beetle. They consume aphids. So I would say ladybird beetles are probably your best bet. And it's also it's also less time consuming than you having to go around and using soapy water, particularly if you have a large farm, that really would not work that well. So um, ladybird beetles are good. I'm just thinking there's probably some companion plants that you could use too that would discourage aphids. Um, like I believe marigold is pretty good for discouraging the growth of aphids. But neem oil is also quite useful because it disrupts the feeding of aphids. So neem oil, but they also sell insecticidal soaps. I don't know whether you can get them. So I'm not talking about your ordinary Dove or kitchen soap variety, but there are insecticidal soaps that they sell that will damage the aphid without causing any residue to be taken up by your plants. So that is one option. I'm not sure if your agricultural supply place has insecticidal soaps, but as I said, the best thing is to monitor because early prevention and early treatment is the best treatment. Um, use biological control like your ladybird beetle. Neem oil also works, and I believe marigold and cilantro I think also works well with aphids. I'm not sure. I'm subject to correction, but I think they work well with aphids.
Okay, so the neem oil, would you have to take the actual neem seeds to get the oil, or is there another way?
They normally sell neem oil. I don't know I'm not sure how you produce neem oil. I've never done it. I'm sure there is a way to extract the oil from the neem. And again, fortunately these days, Google gives you all these answers. So there's some things I don't even try to keep in my head anymore. When I need the answer, I just go to Google and I get it. But I'm sure you could find a much better response than I can give you for how you get neem oil from the neem if you can't buy it again in an agricultural store.
Okay, that's all I had. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to Miss Morgan and then Charles. So go ahead, Miss Morgan.
Hi, good night, everyone. So this is in response to the question that the young lady just mentioned was the neem oil. Okay, so I have to take this with a grain of salt because I'm new to farming. I don't have a farm, I have a garden. But I had a real problem with aphids on my lime tree. a few months ago, and I did use neem oil and combined it. So about a tablespoon of neem oil, tablespoon of Castile soap. So you can get Castile soap. It's made with either olive oil or coconut oil, and just the regular soap, whatever that substances they use to make the soap. I forget what it's called, but it's a natural soap. They use it on babies. It's very good actually for sensitive skin. And I think a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar to a liter of water. And it worked phenomenally well. Now, I was told that it doesn't kill the eggs, but honestly, it's been like 3 months, 4 months. I haven't had any problems. And I sprayed it for about a week, sprayed the leaves for about a week with it. And it seemed to have eradicated all of them. I would suggest you go back in every other week or so, or every week, and like just spray it again if you have a larger area. But that really worked for me. I got the neem oil. You can get them either at the health food store. So they sell concentrated neem oil because it's excellent for your hair. It makes your hair grow, makes your nails grow, it makes your skin very smooth. So you can get it bottled already, cold pressed with no preservatives. Mine is organic, but I think they have an industrial strength one on Amazon. Not an Amazon fan, but you can get it there. Same with the Castile soap. I paid $17 US for a 2-liter jug of pure organic Castile soap. So just hope that helps. And I had a question in the Q&A section as well for the doctor.
While you're there, you can go ahead and state what your question was.
Okay, let me pull it up. I can't remember. My memory's bad. Okay. So I agree that organic is more valuable, but this is about the organic produce, but should it cost more? So this is a North American tactic that they use you pay more for organic because it's better for you and what's not, and it's supposed to cost more. But spraying also has a monetary cost to it, as well as long-term health costs. So it's not necessarily an obvious cost, but there are costs to it in the long term for people's health. And this North American thinking, to me anyways, is that it feeds into a system where only the wealthy deserve to be healthy, as opposed to everyone. So I don't completely agree that organic should cost more. I think that in the end, they all it balances out, because you're either paying with more time and effort, yes, but it's healthier for everyone in the end. Everything has to balance out in the end. And while people might be able to afford organic, that cost will bleed out into the community. If you've got sick people all around you, everyone will suffer in the end. It will cost everyone in the end, because we all have to pay into healthcare systems, into community systems, if people are sick because they're not eating properly or getting healthy foods to eat. So just my 2 cents. Just wanted to get your comment on that.
No, I think it's an excellent point, and that's why I said, well, a couple of things. First of all, local production is what I encourage, and I did say that it depends on how we label organic. So how North America and Europe labels organic, I don't think is necessarily how we should label organic. First of all, I think any locally produced food is much healthier than any food that we import, because we do not use the same level of pesticides and farm chemicals that are used in North America or any of the other places where we import our foods from. So I would encourage us to just buy and eat more local produce, whether it's labeled organic or not, because one, it's fresh, two, it has less additives to it. And no, I agree with you. It doesn't, because it's organic doesn't mean that it has to be more expensive. What is more expensive is the imported product. But in some instances, if you are going to export, if you're going into commercial farming, so there are two types of farming. There's subsistence farming and there's commercial farming. If you're going into commercial farming and you are going to do organic production, then it is more labor intensive. You can't control your weeds by using a weedicide. You now have to either hand pluck your weeds, or you have to have someone going around and weeding every single plant, that is more labor intensive. So it is undeniable that organic, if you have to do it the way it is defined, will increase your cost of production. When you have if you have a pest outbreak or disease outbreak, you cannot treat it, you may end up losing your entire crop. And that itself has another cost associated with it. So if it is that we're going to ask people, and not so much for the domestic market, but if you're going to ask people to produce organic, then we have to understand that producing organic does come with more risk. It does come sometimes with higher costs, and that there should be a premium that is available to someone who is producing an organic crop. But the main thing is I believe a lot of our production in the Caribbean, while it may not be organic, is very close to organic because we are not heavy users of pesticides, and certainly we are relatively less users of pesticides than you find in many of these other countries. So my plea to you is always to reduce on your use of pesticides and fertilizers as much as possible, so that what you sell is wholesome, is nutritious, and it's healthy. And when I go to the supermarket, or I go to the local produce market to buy produce, very seldom at the back of my mind is it that I'm consuming, or I will be consuming produce that is laced with pesticides or insecticides. That's very seldom on my mind because I know I'm buying fresh local produce. So I think what we need to do is to encourage people to buy as much local as possible. And where there is an organic market, I still believe that given the risk involved in organic production and the cost involved with organic production, if we're doing it for commercial farming, then for the people who are selling it that way, that there has to be a premium attached to it. But I agree with you. We should not price food out of the reach of the ordinary person so that poor people have to eat unhealthy food and people with means have to eat organic food. And that's not the case, actually. It's not the case in our region, because the food that's available in the market that's accessible to everyone is, I believe, as close to organic as you can get anyway. So I think that's an issue that's more of a North American concern than it is a Caribbean concern. I can go to the fresh produce market in Roseau, the one in Castries, the one in any one of our islands, and be guaranteed that I'm getting food that is, it may not pass the North American definition of organic, but it certainly is as close to organic, I think, as you could get.
Yes, it's absolutely much better. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. We will take Ms. Charles, and then we head over to the Q&A box. Ms. Charles, you can go ahead and unmute.
Okay, good evening, Dr. Fletcher. Wonderful presentation. I could not be distracted. You had my full attention. My question is, or one of my questions, in terms of the kitchen waste, for example, it's my backyard garden, but I do sell out of it sometimes. Should I just be throwing the plantain peeling and everything into the root of the plantain? Is that proper? Because that's what I saw growing up. But is it still okay to do it that way?
Are you talking about for creating compost?
Yeah. Well, I don't even create compost. I just put it in the root of the plant. So I don't do the barrel like you said that you have.
And you don't have a compost pit?
No, I just choose the plantain. I say, okay, today I put in you, tomorrow I will put in you, and so is that practical?
Yeah, because what you're doing is you're returning organic matter to your soil. So the most important thing is to return as much organic matter to the soil as possible. You could do that in the form of a compost bin that you're allowed to form and to create compost, but you could also do it in the form of allowing the organic material to decay. You just have to make sure that what you're doing does not create a husbandry problem for you, that you're not now creating conditions that would make it easier for pests and diseases to grow, for fungus to grow and to affect that plant. So that's the only thing I would say that you have to be careful about. that you don't now create a micro condition around that plant by putting that decaying organic matter there that might encourage the growth of pests and diseases. So just monitor it very carefully. But if you're doing it and you find that it is working and it is helping with the soil, then I would not see a reason for me to tell you to stop doing it. Because what
Okay.
you're doing is you're putting organic matter back into your soil, and that's always very important for improving the texture of your soil, for improving its water retention capacity, all of these things. So yes.
And should I do it the same way for the beds, like the lettuce? Let's say I grow lettuce, and so should I do the same way, or should I make it decompose
I
first
would,
before
yeah.
putting?
Yeah, with leafy vegetables, I would not just drop it in there. I would be more comfortable with allowing it to put compost in there as opposed to just dropping the decaying material in there. Now, some farmers might tell you they've been doing it and it works with their leafy vegetables. I don't know, but if it were me, I would be a little bit less comfortable doing it that way as opposed to improving the texture of the soil before I transplant my lettuce seedlings with compost.
Okay. And one more question. This had to do with the main, which is climate change. And you were speaking about certain things that can affect us as farmers. And as you rightly said, when a hurricane hits an island, it's not just Roseau, it's everywhere. It's Dominica, and we are all affected. Well, my question is, as a Caribbean community, why are we so reliant on, let's say, imports from all the way India, all the way from wherever it is? Why can't we, let's say, our packaging material? Why can't we do it so that we are less affected by, let's say, fuel costs, or if there's a war happening like right now and we cannot get in certain things? I think we have the capacity, but I am not sure why is it that we don't produce more of what we really need as a Caribbean community. So I don't know if you can speak to that. Maybe there are certain things that are happening behind the scenes that I am not aware of. But if you can speak to that. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a question I think that we've been asking for the longest while. Why are we not growing more of what we eat? Why are we depending so much on imported products? And it's been tried in so many different ways. I remember in the 1980s, we would talk about import substitution and how there were certain products that we would not import into the island anymore, and we'd use alternatives to them. So you wouldn't import your wheat flour anymore, for example. You could use breadfruit flour, or you could use cassava flour or something. To be honest, I don't know why. I think one of the problems is it's difficult for any one island, particularly an island that has a very strong tourism industry. It's difficult for that island to be able to supply the produce that the population, both the resident and the visitor population, would need on a consistent basis. So St. Lucia, for example, every year St. Lucia has a million visitors on the island. Maybe 400,000 of them are stayover visitors, and another 700,000 cruise ship visitors. So let's say you have 400,000, 500,000 people who are on the island for a particular period of time. To be able to find the food to supply these people, particularly when, and this is a problem in my country, it's something I've spoken about, particularly when we have not had proper land use policies and plans in place to preserve the agricultural land. So I did a lecture a few years ago, the Sir Lewis Memorial Lecture, and in doing it, I looked at the impact of poor land use practices on agricultural land. And you're Dominican, I'm assuming, so you'd understand this phrase I'm going to use, but it was a quebche for me. It broke my heart when I saw the amount of land we've lost in St. Lucia, agricultural land we've lost in St. Lucia, to commercial, to residential, to manufacturing, the number of farms that have been abandoned. So you can't even talk about food security if you're not preserving your agricultural land. So we went probably from a situation of having 60,000 acres of land under agriculture to now maybe around 15,000 acres. There's a census that is currently taking place, an agricultural census, and I'll be surprised, if it doesn't show that the figure is actually worse than that. So for you to have food security, for you to produce what you eat, you need to preserve the land that would allow you to produce what you eat. You also need to provide incentives to farmers to make it possible. All the countries that have strong agricultural sectors, they get support they get incentives, because farming is difficult. I don't have to tell you that. You know it. You live it every single day. Farming is difficult. Farming is risky. You have to deal with pests and diseases. You have to deal with two-legged pests. You have to deal with pre-deal larceny. The number of times you have to deal with people coming onto your farm and stealing your dasheen or stealing your plantain. That happens all the time. You have to deal with crop failure because of heat or because of drought. So it's not like any other sector that you could go in where okay, I buy X amount of product, I mix those two things together, I will get X amount of output. Agriculture is not that way. So we have to find a way, if we are agreeing that food security is so important to us, if we are agreeing that a strong nation requires food security and requires a robust agricultural sector, then we have to be able to provide support to our farming community. If we don't provide support to them, then it becomes a labor of love for you. I know many of you are in farming because you love it, not because you're making money from it. Unfortunately, you're not making the kind of money that you need to make it a profitable thing. And some people have left farming for precisely that reason. So it's challenging when it is so difficult to farm in our countries. And we're not talking about flat countries. We're talking about countries that are mountainous. So farming on a hillside is more challenging. It's more expensive. The cost of inputs is high. We're not making our own fertilizer. We're not making our own animal feed. We have to import our animal feed. We have to import our fertilizer. The fuel that we're using in our vehicles, we have to import it, and the price goes up. If there's a war in Iran like you have right now, the price of that fuel goes up. There's so many things that are impacting you as a farmer that it makes it very difficult for you to do the job that is required of you. And, we really have to treat with farming. When I say farming, I mean beef farming, I mean fishing, I mean everything to do with the agricultural sector. We need to treat with it differently if we are to be able to feed ourselves, because the way it is right now, it's very difficult to feed ourselves. It's much easier to bring in a 40-foot container from Miami. It is. Unfortunate, and that should never be the case. And that's why so many of us are getting sick, because we eating chicken that is 4 years old and 5 years old, and that has been injected with so much hormones and everything else and antibiotics. But try having a local broiler industry where you have to be importing the feed to feed your broilers, and you'll see how it doesn't make sense for Mr. KFC to buy your broilers. It makes a lot more sense for him to bring in those broilers from somewhere else because it's so much cheaper, or to bring in these 6-week-old chickens and use them for that box that is being sold for so much money. The reality I wouldn't sugarcoat it to you and make it look as if it's all nice and rosy. It's not. You know that even better than I do. It's not.
Okay, just one more thing, Dr. Fletcher, before I go. You referred to something about the land security. And just recently we had some land slippage. Well, there were landslides, not just slippage, there were landslides. And someone mentioned that during the time of our former Prime Minister, Miss Charles, when she gave agricultural land, she said it was only for agriculture, and there was something in place where it was, for want of a better word, maybe illegal to build homes on it. And the person said, when you use agricultural land to put houses, that is what happened. So it's just, as you mentioned that, securing our land, that statement came back to mind that a lot of us are now building on lands that were not meant for concrete.
Yeah, we are. And the other thing we're doing is that we're clearing slopes so we're taking all the vegetation that is binding that soil together. So you have trees on those slopes, or trees on that land, and the roots of the trees are holding the soil together. And we kill the plant, we kill the tree, we cut the tree, and we plant, we build something on it, and we don't understand that soil is a lot more fragile than it was before, and any heavy rain will wash that soil away. And the other thing too is that vegetative cover that was on that soil, that was acting as a break when that heavy rainfall fell. That rain was not falling directly on the soil; it was falling on vegetation. That's not there anymore, and that is another big problem that we're encountering. So yeah, land land use is so very important, and ensuring that we manage that soil, manage it properly, is something that we really must pay attention to, because it without soil, unless you're going to go into hydroponics, and I don't know that any one of us can feed ourselves entirely on hydroponics, so unless you're going to go into hydroponics and aquaponics, by planting everything in PVC tubes, then you need soil. You need soil, and you need to manage that soil.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Much. How do you know when the compost is ready to be given back to the soil?
You feel it. You when it looks like soil, you put your hand in it and you realize, okay, you know what? This is something that looks like soil, that's ready, that can go back to soil. But for me, it's a field test. I look at it and I can tell, okay, you know what? This compost looks like soil. It's not mushy, you're not still seeing elements of the produce the cane produce that you put in there. It is in a manner that looks like it's an eye test and a field test, and you know that field as in FEEL, not FIELD. You know that, okay, this compost is ready to be used. And if you're a farmer, trust me, you'll know. You know what good needs to go into your soil, and what can go into your soil, and what shouldn't go into your soil. Even if you're a new farmer, you know.
Thank you. Are coffee granules safe for leafy vegetables? And what are your views on liquid manure?
Liquid manure. Okay, let's look at the first one. I know coffee granules are used in some instances. I'm not sure for which plants. But I do know that the spent coffee grounds, I'm just thinking intuitively, they would add nitrogen. They will also help to speed up some level of decomposition when you mix it with dry leaves, etc. But I would not use a high percentage of coffee grounds in compost or in anything else. I think mixed in small amounts it can work, but I would not use it alone as a mulch, for example. I would mix it, and I would not use a lot of it.
All right, thank you. Another question is from a Dominican. She's currently living in BVI and have been trying to keep her garden alive, especially her lime tree, but find it very difficult. And she think it's the soil pH. So she wants to know, how do you check the level of pH in your soil or the type of soil that she has within the area that she's staying?
Oh, you could buy a test. You could buy a test kit. It should be relatively simple to buy a test kit that you could use to test the pH of your soil. You wouldn't be able to do it any other way. If you when you went to school, when you were doing chemistry, they used a litmus paper to determine what was there, whether the soil, well, whatever we were testing, whether it was acidic or alkaline, and it's not much different with your soil. So you need a test kit to test the pH of your soil. But it's something, particularly if you live in the US, it's something that can be very easily bought at any store. I'm sure if you go to Home Depot, you can get a soil test kit.
All right. Miss Morgan, they're just asking you kindly if you could just put the mixture of how you control the aphids in the chat. Um, hmm, how about eggshells? How effective are they on your farm?
eggshells. So I know eggshells are very useful with my orchids. Eggshells give you a slow form of release of calcium because that's what your eggshells are. Eggshells are mostly calcium carbonate with small amounts of magnesium, potassium, and phosphorus. So what I would do with eggshells is rinse them properly to make sure that there's no egg residue in it. Allow them to dry, out completely, and if possible, bake them. So, and then you crush them up and bake them so that you grind them into a fine powder. And the finer the powder is, the more that calcium, the quicker that calcium would become available to them. But I would mix powdered eggshells into soil before planting, and it can help release calcium gradually over months. And you could also add eggshells, the crushed eggshells, to your compost pile. That way you're adding calcium to it. So yes, crushed eggshells, but like I say, rinse them, make sure there's no egg, there's no yolk, there's no albumin in the leftover, and bake them, dry them up, and crush them, and they are very useful there.
Okay,
The other thing too, I've heard that they also say that eggshells repel slugs. I don't know how true that is, but there are some gardeners who tell you that when they use eggshells, they don't have as many problems with slugs and snails. I can't vouch for that.
okay, thank you. We're gonna just take one last question from the Q&A and then head over to those persons whose hands are raised, and then we will conclude the Q&A segment because it's approaching to 8:30. So is there current strong advocacy for policy shift in our government so that organic produce is supported over inorganic?
Well, I wouldn't call for a policy shift to support organic over inorganic. I think there has to be a balance. I think what is more important to me is that organic is recognized and organic is given the share of the market that would allow it to be profitable for people who are engaging in organic production. Whether there is a policy push within the ministries of agriculture, not that I've heard of. I must admit, I am not as close to ministries of agriculture as I used to be at one point because I've kind of moved over more into climate and energy. But again, there's nothing stopping you. That's what Helen's Daughters is about. Helen's Daughters is about helping farmers have a voice, a collective voice to influence policy. And I think, I'm not sure what are the subsequent programs that you will have in this annual version of the Academy. But I think it's certainly something that you could look at if there's an expert there that can help, if there's a policy person in there. But yeah, it wouldn't hurt for Helen's Daughters to advocate for organic to have some share of the market. I would not, like I say, I would not push for organic to take over inorganic, to take over normal production. What I would push for is for production to be as healthy as least chemical intensive as possible. If you don't have to use chemicals, don't use chemicals. Don't do like these people that the first sign of something, or they allow a problem to get big on them, and then they have no choice but to start spraying like a crazy woman or a crazy man. But yeah, I certainly would encourage a dialogue on it and what place organic can have in the market, in the local market.
All right, thank you. We're gonna head over to the person who hands are raised. So I will give Christine permission to speak, and then we're followed by Roxanne Thompson. So Christine, you could go ahead. Okay, well, Christine hand is down. So Roxanne.
Hello, good night. I don't want to stay long because it's late already for the others too. Just first want to thank for the interesting, excellent presentation of Dr. Fletcher, and to the Helen's Daughter for the opportunity for all of us to be part of this interesting venture. I just wanted to say something about Dr. Fletcher said about most of the produce you can get in the local market would be mainly organic. I fully support his encouragement that we should buy locally and produce as much locally. But to be honest, in Dominica, if you go to the market, many, if not most of the produce, they're far from organic. And one of the reasons is also that in our country, very poisonous herbicide. You never spoke about herbicide, pesticide and fertilizer, but herbicide is a big part too. Well-known Gramazone or Roundup is still allowed and even encouraged to use, although it's banned in almost all of the world for many years. So this one is affecting both the soil as the farmer as well. And I think in this thing, I don't agree with you when you say organic shouldn't be also pushed on government level, because I feel in Dominica, particular as a nature island, but we as the Caribbean, we could push more organic because it's not just healthy food, it's healthy soil, it's healthy farmers, it's healthy nations. So, and yes, it's more labor intense and all that, so it costs more money to produce. So there, the government could come in with subsidized so that the farmer doesn't lose, but it would still be affordable for everybody. I had liked the point of the lady that spoke about America. Healthy food is only for the rich. That is totally wrong, in my opinion. Everybody should have the right to eat healthy. So that is my opinion. And there, I had make a note when I saw the excellent presentation, but in the section pest and disease, the only thing I was missing, it had no point about use natural methods and thing like for pesticide, herbicide, like the companion planting you mentioned, or like biological with the ladybugs, which not so easy to get sometimes. But this, in my view, should be also on the list for us to be less vulnerable for pest and disease. That we learn old methods from natural methods, but also scientific stuff. And I can understand you cannot answer all those questions because your topic was the climate change or climate crisis in agriculture. But this, I think, would be a nice thing to cover in another session. Okay, as closing.
Thank you. No, I agree with you entirely. And I don't want you to leave with the impression that I'm saying do not promote organic, because I did say use as little chemical as possible. My issue, what I was trying to say is do not squeeze out the farmer who cannot do organic by creating a market only for organic. I think both of them have to coexist, which is why I also said that we need to create the conditions that would allow organic farmers to get a reasonable return for the effort that they're putting in. So definitely, I would like a market in every single one of our islands that is 100% organic. I just know it's not possible. It's not possible for us to have a 100% organic market in every single Caribbean island. But what we want to do is to encourage people to use integrated pest management, to use companion plants, to use biological control, to do everything that they can to, as I said earlier, the best prevention is early detection. If you detect early, you can treat, and you don't have to wait until you have a full-blown pest or disease problem on your hand that you now have to go like a crazy person spraying and treating to deal with the problem. So definitely reduce the use of pesticides, reduce the use of herbicides. Every island is supposed to have a pesticide and control chemicals board, whether it meets regularly. I remember when I was in agriculture, I sat on that board, not as permanent secretary, but in a previous life. And that board is supposed to every so often review the pesticides that are in use and look at what the recent information, the recent scientific information is on it. And if it is that a pesticide, particularly a herbicide, has been seen to be dangerous, that there's new information that comes out that is carcinogenic or teratogenic or something, then to remove it from production, to remove it from circulation, sorry, and also to not allow entry into the country of any pesticides that are harmful to people. I'm not sure whether these boards still exist, but I do know that there were pesticide and toxic chemical boards that operated in all of our islands that had broad-ranging representation that was supposed to deal with those things. But like I said, bottom line is use as little chemical as possible, because that way we are ensuring that our people are eating healthily. We also need to encourage people to not buy produce from people who are not farmers or who are not associated with farmers, because that's where you end up ingesting produce that may have pesticide residues in it. So, for example, a farmer has just sprayed his cabbage crop for caterpillars, and that farmer, the responsible farmer, would leave a particular period of time, be it 14 days or whatever, during which those residues would reduce, and it would be safe to harvest those cabbages and sell it to the consumer. Somebody passes the day or 2 days after the farmer has sprayed his cabbages or her cabbages, and then steals them, and then goes and presents it, and people buy it, and they're now consuming product that has levels of pesticide that the ordinary responsible farmer would not put to market. So there is a responsibility that we have as consumers, and I think one of the things that we need to do is to educate people, to tell them that it's not because this person is selling a cabbage slightly cheaper than you would get from a farmer that you should buy, because that cabbage is more than likely a cabbage that is a stolen cabbage, and that cabbage can end up causing you more harm, and you'll end up paying more money at the hospital in a couple of years' time than you would if you paid a little bit more money for that cabbage now. So there are just so many dimensions to this. But yeah, healthy is eating with produce that has as little chemicals and chemical additives as possible. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's also for our body, but also for our soil. Because if we have a more natural way of growing, we have the microbes and this whole network of nature working together. And if we kill that with everything. Just one thing because some had put it in the question and answer thing too, and some ask about, different methods. I think if we go online, Google or even AI nowadays, you can find a lot of recipes for natural things with stuff that we can get, like even garlic and other things. So maybe we have that in a session. That would be nice too, but I think everybody can go online and search for it.
Yeah, agreed. Thanks.
Thank you so much. So we are currently at 8:31, Dr. Fletcher. There are a few, obviously, questions that coming in. How much more can you take?
Not many. What you can do is send me those questions. I can give you responses and then send them back to you.
Yes, I'll be
Yeah.
happy to do that. So those persons who had their hand up on the Q&A box, utilizing the Q&A box, please just private message me your question and I will compile them and send them to Dr. Fletcher. Thank you so much again, Dr. Fletcher, for such an informative session. It's really a pleasure having you and to be the first one to set the precedent for the remaining of the program. So it was very nice. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining us here tonight. I know it was very informative for you again. And I will see you next week, Tuesday, same time. Thank you so much and do have a wonderful night.
Thanks, everyone. Bye. Good night.
Good night.